I'm just waiting for our live stream to get uploaded and get set up, and then we'll get started for the evening. I'm just waiting for our live stream to get and get set up, and then we'll get started for the evening. I'm just waiting for our live stream to All right. Good evening. Can you all hear me? Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Nicole.
Can I get a thumbs up? Maybe Tammy, who's in my screen. Okay, you can hear me. I am not entirely sure. Thank you, Eli. Not entirely sure. Technology is doing its thing with me today. So I apologize a bit for the delay. Alexandra or Tammy, can you check the live stream just to make sure that we're live on our YouTube?
Yes, I'll pull it up.
It looks like we are from my screen, but I want to just absolutely make sure. We are recording. All right. So good evening, everyone. While we're checking our technology to make sure that our live stream is working, bringing you all into our Community Budget Review Committee. My name is Nicole Watson. I'm Senior Director of Family and Community Engagement, and our FACE team is helping to support our review committee this evening. I'm going to ask for the move to the next slide so we can walk through our agenda. I do think our chair is here. So before we do much, I want to make sure that she gets an opportunity to kick our meeting off and bring us to order. So I am looking at one computer, but my voice is coming through a different computer. So we are rocking and rolling. Everyone can hear me. I'm waiting for a chairperson.
While we're waiting, I can see that the live stream is working on YouTube, Nicole. I did notice that the captions weren't visible on YouTube.
Okay. Let's see if I can get her to unmute. I'm just waiting to make sure that we are okay. Looks like our chairperson is coming in with a different device. Let's give us just a moment. Director Booth, were you able to check and see if we were on the live stream? Is it up? Were you able to see? Okay.
Yes.
Just making sure.
Yeah. So Alexandra just noted that the captions might not be showing up.
Yeah, let's see. Test, how about now? Okay. I see captions are on. Chairperson has joined us. So we're going to give her a moment to call the meeting to order so we can walk through our agenda for this evening.
Greetings all. I apologize. I'm having technical difficulties. I would like to formally call our meeting to order. Thank you for your graciousness.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. And we too are having some technical difficulties. It must be the sunny weather, but that's okay. We do hard things. And we're going to move forward and get our agenda into the space tonight so that you all can begin your committee conversations. So just a few housekeeping reminders is what we're going to walk through in just a moment. You're going to hear the 2026-27 proposed budget overview and orientation to committee resources, which are some in-depth slides and different deliverables that our Chief Morrison will help walk you through. Well, there will be also a review of prior CBRC report, so you can see what has traditionally been created and submitted. And then you all will have an opportunity to plan your own approach to the creation of your report. With that, we'll move into just the light housekeeping and reminders, a slide that you are all familiar with and have seen before. Next slide, Habakkuk. This is the space where you know that we route all of our questions through our intake form, that all questions and answers are being kept and tracked in a separate, in the document that is linked under access. All of our materials are hosted on our CBRC website. And for any logistical support, the lovely Ms. Cheryl Pittman is available via email. And then I'm going to introduce Chief Morrison to talk a little bit about the interactive resource planning activity.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, looking good. Okay. So I am not operating the slides and I'm not sure if we were planning on opening links. We have a lot of links in these slides that take you to other places. This particular interactive resource planning activity, it's a tool that was provided for us, a custom tool by ERS, and they have done this for districts across the nation. And it is technically known as Budget Hold'em for districts. And what that does for us is, this isn't the actual activity, this is the opening slide. So if we put your email in there, you can start a new game. And it is not in any way making light of our budget situation. This is simply a way, thank you, Habakkuk, for us to get our community to have a better idea of proportionately what different budget balancing strategies mean. And so you can go ahead and save this budget target. Oh, what a team. Okay, and it's a little bit small on the screen because it is via Zoom, but you have access to this link and tool and can go in and make your own choices. You can see in the upper right-hand corner, there's it's kind of going to monitor progress as we move towards that target, that budget balancing target. And oh, that is great. Thank you. So you can see for offering for instructional time, for example, different impacts to instructional time, and proportionally, if that would be an increase to the budget by percentage or a decrease. And given that the target is a -6%, we we would hope that the community would do both things, guided by their own personal priorities, and then eventually arrive at that -6% target. But it does give us, folks often will say, make sure the lights are off, cut back on supplies, things like that. When they're only such a small portion of our operating budget, it's really more giving them a sense of orientation as we talk about different budgeting strategies. So Habakkuk, thank you for the tour. I do hope that the CBRC members take advantage of this for their own personal use and knowledge, but then also circulate this link so that we can have other communities gain a higher understanding of our budget balancing strategies and their impact. All right.
Thank you so much for that, Chief Morrison. I love the differentiation, right? We all learn in different styles. And so having a tool that helps differentiate this really complex conversation around budget, I think is really useful. So thank you. I want to give us a moment. We're going to move to the next slide and I'm going to introduce Director Booth, who's going to walk us through a little bit of the timeline and what you can expect between now and May 12th. Director Booth.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, I'd like to just jump in and share where we are here today, Wednesday, April 29th. We're here at our CBRC meeting, and then we have a series of meetings that are going to kind of run a little fast and furious. May 4th, 6th, 7th is the 7th is a leader meeting, and then the due date for the deliverable or the reports is going to be May 11th, and then the next day we're engaging with the board and delivering the presentation and report. And so this is just to ground you in the path forward and the timeline, and kind of the description of what activities will be taking place to make sure we can have a report ready to go to the board for you to present. Are there any questions on the timeline at all? All right, then I'm going to hand it back.
Thank you, Director Booth. And with that, we get to hear from Chief Morrison once again with the proposed budget overview and orientation to our committee resources. Chief Morrison.
All right, thank you very much again. And I've been talking a lot lately, so my voice is a little rough tonight, and I do apologize for that. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. So when we are talking a lot about our budget proposal, last night we delivered that to our board. The superintendent delivered her budget message. I'm hopeful that some of this group was able to tune into that and listen to that. We have a link as well to the presentation that was shared with the board. And when we think of the board, we think of community at large. So anyone has access to this information at this time. We followed up this morning with a media release, knowing that some of those items that we shared would be fairly sensitive. And the superintendent's proposed budget message, she delivered that verbally. It's not contained inside of the proposed budget, but we will have the narrative of that word for word in our budget book as we move towards adoption. So just to be clear about that. So we did also do a board training for my first time, giving the board some information about how to read our budget document. And I would yield to the chair to determine whether or not that is something that we need to use time tonight to do. We have a very robust volume 1, super proud of everyone who worked on it. It's a immense effort from multiple departments, and to have that completed and delivered on time and in time for our directors to review it before the budget committee meeting was a monumental feat. Super proud of our team. Just plug in you guys. And then in PPS, there's also a proposed budget volume 2, which is near and dear to the community. It includes a heat map that shows our total staff to student ratios. Oh, thanks, Andy. The total staff to student ratios, the per student spending. And we got some great feedback from the board last night on how to even improve that even further. And then it has a school by school report where you can see multiple years of staffing and what we have included in the proposed budget. So it looks like as well, I'm just running down this list, and then maybe Chair can give me some guidance on if we want to dig deeper into any of these items tonight. We have the budget document Excel workbooks, which I would invite Director Booth to speak to. This is new, and it has been requested before, and we have not been able to deliver that in time for the CBRC review. So it looks like we do have that available. Tammy, would you like to share about that?
Yeah, I can jump on. This was a request from this group. I'm a big fan of transparency, as I know Chief Morrison is as well. And so you should be able to dig into these Excel format reports to pivot to, they're set just as view only of note. And so and they are in Google Drive, so you'll need to make a copy to do kind of some individual analysis, and that's to just preserve the integrity of the information contained within. But I would encourage you to poke around and look at through those as you're digging in and crafting your report.
Thank you for that. I would note that questions that maybe come up for you as you manipulate those materials, those should be submitted via form so that we can be consistent about how we receive those questions and then how we respond in a way that everyone has access to the same information. I think that it's really important to have a balanced approach to this. From a person to everyone, is there an option for printed copies? Yes, there is. We can provide them by request. we have found that in prior years, we have printed a lot of copies that went unused. And as this is an iterative process, we really keep for record the final adopted budget, which we again complete and deliver in June. So this as a proposed, if it helps you to have a printed copy, we can absolutely provide that by request. Okay, and then we're moving on to the local option levy reporting. So really, it's Alexandra who probably knows this most intimately. We are required to, that's a function of the CBRC, is to review how we are spending those dollars and include that in the report to the board. And then we have our link to the CBRC questions and answers. I know we have had some really great questions and done a lot of digging to provide responses to those. So I hope that as a collective that maybe before submitting additional questions, we reflect on what's already been answered, because oftentimes our community will think alike and they'll have the same questions. So really encourage you to visit that link. We will be keeping it updated as questions come in and as our responses become available. And so I think at this point, I'd like to yield to our chair to determine if and what on this screen we would like to dig into a little bit more.
Thank you so much. I think I'm going to yield to the consensus because I'm not sure what people are feeling like they need to be accessing. And so I don't know if we should put that in the chat or if we should just go, starting with the board presentation and maybe give an overview of what that training was like. But I feel like I might have one desire that might not be for the group, and I know that we don't have time to go through everything.
Well, I will ask Nicole to step in. She's great at gathering and tracking feedback. So let's see where our discussion leads us.
All right. So what we are wondering from our committee is how detailed we want to be in looking through some of the resources that Chief Morrison is walking us through. And we are hearing from our chair that while she might have some feelings or might not need to go as deep into some of the deliverables, she wants to yield to committee to ensure that we're as thorough as possible tonight. So committee, how are you feeling? And what do you need tonight to look deeper at? Or are you feeling pretty well solid and ready to move forward with the budget presentation? Don't be shy.
So just clarifying question, we're going to do the budget, the overview of the proposed budget regardless, or that's also a question of whether we want to go through that?
Let me clarify that. Chief Morrison, will you clarify on the moment what we are deliberating?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. We could go either way with tonight. We do have a finite amount of time, and both the budget proposal and the training for how to navigate our document they're both recorded. So that is something that our committee could do asynchronously, and then we can come back and answer questions, or we can step through some of that tonight. I think that's what I'm wondering.
I can jump in. I have attended the meeting yesterday and am familiar with the structure of the document and have even looked at this one. So I personally don't need to go through those pieces. The two things that I'd love to do is that we mentioned the examples of past CBRC output. So I'd love to have time for that. I also have a specific question that's part how-to on the budget and part specific budget question that I'd appreciate the chance to ask if we have time.
Thank you so much for that, Anne. Anyone else want to weigh in? We are educators, so we're going to give a little wait time.
Yeah, I watched the presentation last night and found it really helpful, and I definitely had a couple of questions coming out of that. So I kind of defer to. I'm not sure whether everyone else had a chance to watch it, but I think I think, Anne, I'm agreeing with you that it would be nice to have a little bit of time to ask some questions. And I'm also really interested as a first-time member in just orienting to what reports have looked like in the past.
Heard. Okay. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate that.
Yeah, just also was at the board presentation yesterday and already have like a laundry list with slides, numbers of questions that I have about some of the pieces. I think it's really helpful when we can go deeper into detail here at the CBRC, but also want to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're not moving too fast if folks haven't seen the budget presentation yet.
I'll chime in and add that I'm sort of in the same boat as everybody else. So also saw everything yesterday. So I think we're coming at a consensus that most of us feel pretty comfortable, I think, with what was presented yesterday and just kind of moving forward.
Okay. Thank you, Angela. Thank you so much, Shane. Okay. I'll just give a little bit more wait time for those that might be running to their computer to hit mute. Just want to give it a minute because it seems like we're ready then to do a deeper dive. So Chief Morrison, I think we are ready to tee it up let's slide through Habakkuk. Do you mind moving us a little further, one slide up? So here's where we're gonna walk through the review of the CBRC reports. That should be slide 8. Yeah. So I want again to yield to our chairperson. How in depth, where do we want to begin? What do we want to look at potentially from our previous reports that are on this slide here that we can click in the presentation? And Anne, thank you for dropping the presentation into the chat for folks who might want to access.
Can you reframe your statement? Are you asking what I think where we should start in the proposed budget review?
Yep, just yielding to you as we can
yeah.
definitely yield to the committee. I just wanted to see if there's an orientation here. I know that this is the chairs, you and our vice chairs, to kind of lead this process. So I wanted to kind of give you all space to dig into these.
Thank you. I think a review of again, I'm going to yield to consensus because I know that we have some new people. But if no one is disagreeing, I think we should maybe start with the proposed budget review and then just kind of go through a high level of what last year was and then allow for questions so that people can get familiar with it.
Okay. So Habakkuk, if you don't mind, if unopposed, we'll just click on that proposed budget review, that middle.
Can I make one suggestion or ask one clarifying question? Sorry. I don't feel strongly about what order we do this. What I heard a couple people ask for is also to make sure we have some amount of time. I know we have finite time, but some amount of time to ask clarifying questions about last night's presentation as well. Are we going to leave time for that?
We would definitely leave time for that. I also
Great.
heard Anne kind of just mentioned that looking at some of these documents would be helpful. If you all, this part is a robust discussion that you all get to have. So I'm going to kind of yield it to our vice chairs and our chair.
Yeah. Well, if it feels good to go, since the board presentation last night is still fresh on minds, if it feels good to start there, I see no concern with that. I think getting those questions out might preface how this is viewed and give us some visibility to the direction that we need to go in with reviewing it. So
okay,
I'm okay with starting there.
Okay.
If you all are.
I'm agnostic. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't skipping past it. That's all.
Yes.
I defer to everyone else. And if we do go straight to questions, we should probably give ourselves a time limit just so we make sure we get to everything else. But that's my only suggestion.
Wiseness coming. I see the wisdom. All right, I'm going to tee it back up to our finance team. Director Booth, Chief Morrison, we want to know what we want to put up. What do we want?
Yeah, let's go back to the slide deck.
Okay.
And what I'm hearing is that the voices that I've heard say go back a couple more slides.
The overview of the budget.
Yeah, for 26-27. Yeah, we want to get back to that slide.
Slide 5, I believe. I mean, slide.
Yeah, I'll tell you when, right here, right here. So I feel like folks aren't as interested in how to read the document as they are in the budget presentation that occurred last night, and it's been less than 24 hours. So my expectation that everyone has had an opportunity to view that is pretty small. Is there interest in going through the presentation again? Or are we feeling like we can take questions? I would ask that if we are taking questions, that one of our support staff are tracking those and submitting them via the form so that we can capture responses. We may not be able to answer all of the questions this evening either. So, but happy to take them and happy to have some discussion on what you heard last night.
Yes, Chief Morrison, we, as your support staff, are tracking questions this evening.
Oh, thank you very much. So we have a link to the board presentation.
Is there anyone? I'm sorry. I feel like I'm talking about, but it's just so what I heard a few people speak up, and it was only a few. So this is why I'm asking this question. Basically, I heard everyone who spoke said that they did actually have a chance to see this presentation last night. I am totally fine going through it again for others because I'm sure not everyone did. But does anyone want to speak up and say that they would like to go through the presentation now, or because if no one wants to, we could just jump to questions. But I just wanted to ask. I don't want to waste anybody's time.
I think one of the things in the presentation that is most helpful is for me to share. I feel like for transparency purposes, I need to share both the revenue and expenditure assumptions that were shared with the community last night so that everyone is kind of level setting on that. And then maybe taking questions. Is that appropriate? So the rest of the information I will consider.
Yeah, I'm fine either way. I just wanted to make sure we only heard from a few voices. So yeah.
Okay. So we're tracking questions, Chief Morrison. We're going to pull up the presentation and you're going to reference a few slides that hopefully will conjure a bit of discussion and then hopefully maybe answering some questions while you're going. We're going to be those questions in real time. Okay. All right. Habakuk, do you want to go to the board presentation? Let's see.
It's the third link under the budget section. So it's the last link.
Proposed budget. Okay.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much. Oh, and it's going to be itty bitty.
We can hit the big X there, yep, and make it right size.
You guys are so great. Thank you. I'm used to going through the Google Slides, so this is super awesome to have some support. So if we go ahead and scroll through, I'll tell you when to stop. The superintendent gave her budget message, and then we talked about the planning that has gone into this budget, which hasn't ever really stopped since we developed the current budget, where we are in timeline, and then the roles in budget development. We are going super fast right now, and I love it. So we have the feedback and inputs where this committee is also a part of that process. And then at the end of budget development, the responsibility moves to the superintendent and all of our staff to implement the budget. All right, we're getting there. So let's go ahead and stop. Stop right here. This is a pretty, wait, on the rising costs. Yeah, let's stop right there. So this is a familiar slide that we continue to bring back. We have tuned it up a little bit to be more appropriate for the 26-27 school year. We have invested in employee compensation, benefits, and teacher planning time via our agreements that we have with our labor partners. And we are experiencing a PERS cost increase starting this year that is expected to continue through at least the 27-29 biennium. We also have limited revenue, so we have less special revenue and no reserve funds to support operations but beyond the 5% minimum fund balance. So just for context, the current year budget, we are using a one-time transfer from our PERS reserve fund of $23.5 million, we're using that as revenue to support our operations, and that is 100% exhausted this current year and not available to us next year. And we did that in an effort to kind of stem off deeper reductions for 25-26. We also have declining enrollment. We have fewer students. PPS is declining at a faster rate than the state of Oregon, which means our proportionate share of the state school fund is reducing quicker than other districts. In some parts of the state, they may be growing, but not in PPS, and that has been a trend for several years. Okay, we can move on. Thank you. We have some information about enrollment and trends over time. I'll just leave that with you. It's an illustration of what I just shared. I really want to concentrate. There's 4 slides here on our revenue assumptions and our expenditure assumptions. And these are all detailed out in the budget book, volume 1 as well. So if you want to look at that as a resource, these bullets and talking points will be in there. Don't wait, don't go too fast. So there's 2 slides on revenue and 2 slides on expenditures. We've added to every slide a note about our projections based on the most recent information available. So all of our estimates and projections will change over time as we receive new information. And I feel like as part of our effort for transparency, we want to make sure that we're upfront about that so that people aren't confused when our projections change. When we get new information, that will impact what our future looks like. So we're paid on a per student basis, and our extended average daily membership weighted. So that is each student enrolled plus any additional state school fund weighting we receive for different classifications of students. For example, if they have an IEP, if they're an English language learner, we record all of that information and report it to the state in a consolidated student report. We do it 4 times a year, and that equals our extended ADMW, and that's across Oregon. That's part of the state school fund distribution formula. We anticipate our share of the second year of the biennium to be $305.4 million. The second year of the biennium tends to be a little more predictable because when we're in the first year of the biennium, the legislature typically hasn't set the appropriation level until the end of June. So we have to make some assumptions around where we think our funding is going to lie for that first year of the biennium. Our current year property tax revenue, you can see, has got a pretty modest increase. We're seeing that our downtown and other areas of Portland are not growing like they have in the past. We have our local option revenue is estimated to be just under $104 million, which is almost a 5% decrease from what we had budgeted for the 25-26 year. One time in our history, we've received a decrease because of the real market values of the downtown properties declining quite sharply. We're planning a 1.8% increase in assessed value and a 95% collection rate based on historical receipts. So there's a whole calculation that we work with the TSCC on in developing that amount. And that increase is also used in our debt service fund, our 300 funds, as we levy taxes to collect revenue to pay debt service on our bonds. Okay, that was a lot. One more revenue slide. Yep. So part of our balanced budgeting strategies for 26-27 is using $3.8 million of Multnomah Education Service District credits. Each credit equals $1, and they are also funded on our behalf on a per student basis. So as a district, we can elect to purchase services from them in a menu based on what the regional service plan is, or we can choose to pull some of those funds through to support our revenue stream. And for 26-27, we are counting on $3.8 million. In February, the district sold $660 million of voter-approved bonds, and those have to be spent according to the ballot title for capital projects. So questions you might get around that are, why is your total budget increasing while you're making these big operational reductions? And that's why you'll see that the all funds budget is increasing significantly while our operating general fund budget is decreasing slightly. We're also anticipating that the general fund beginning fund balance is 41 million, which is that 5% minimum target. If there's any reason that we don't make that at the end of this current year, if that's not what's left over after 25-26, that amount will be reduced. Okay. Now on to expenditures. All right, thank you, Habakkuk. Our proposed expenditures for 26-27 are based on the following assumptions. So our budget is, our general fund operating budget is just under 80% staffing. And so any assumptions we make around cost of living adjustments, STEP, any other things that might increase over time, like we have to pick a place and budget for that. Typically, we will elect to use a 3% cost of living adjustment. And for 26-27, we have in the budget a 1% cost of living adjustment plus STEP. And so we are currently in negotiations with our labor partners, and that it's just important to be super clear about what is contained in the budget. Our pension rate, you can see that we have a blended rate of 4.18%. That's the amount that PPS pays directly to PERS and then into the system. And then we have another almost 18% that we charge against payroll to pay back principal and interest on pension obligation bonds. And that is almost a 23% payroll rate. So for every percent or every dollar in payroll, we have another 23 cents that we pay for folks that qualify for PERS. And that's kind of a hidden cost folks don't always recognize. We are counting on or budgeting for our insurance benefits will continue to increase based on current eligibility. So our current staff and their selections and recent experience. And so we are experiencing a spike in our employee benefit costs. And so we're including that in our budget. So one more slide, and then I'll take a breath. So these are the other employer labor costs, and they do vary by labor group. But you can see that there are other things that we budget for that our staff wouldn't necessarily receive as compensation or benefit at the time that they receive their paycheck. But they are a cost that's included in the budget, and you'll see them in each major fund and as line items. So that is something that you will notice in terms of dollars. We're also anticipating that our services, supplies, and other operational costs are going to grow based on recent and forecasted trends. We've really tried since last spring to implement some cost reduction strategies. But even with that, we understand that some of those costs are growing faster than they have historically. With that, thank you so much for the airtime. I'm going to mute now and ask our chair which direction you would like to go. Is this the time to take questions?
I think this is a perfect moment to pause and take questions. Are you? Can you hear me? I'm still having technical difficulties. I'm so sorry.
That's okay, Chairperson. We've got you. It looks like we're ready to engage in some dialogue and some questions. I'm going to ask the committee, do we need to continue sharing the slide? Would that be helpful to have the visual? How does that, do you want to reference a specific slide when you ask your question? I just want to make sure that and who wants to go first? Okay, what might be helpful is if you use the reaction button to raise your hand, like Anne just demonstrated. then I can create a speaking order and we can make sure that your questions are answered in the order that we see your hand raised. So Anne, we'll start with you.
Thank you. It always takes me a minute on Zoom to figure out where the hand is. It's inside React for those of you who are looking for it. The heart. I want to start off by saying thank you, Chief Morrison and your team, especially for taking the time to build volume 2 of this budget. So helpful for those of us trying to come into this for the first time. And my question is really about how to understand the information that we're seeing in volume 2 and how it relates to the information that we're seeing in volume 1. And I did submit this question to the form, but it didn't fully address it. So I'm glad to have the opportunity to discuss live. I've started digging into the next year's proposed budget that was presented yesterday. And it looks to me like out of every dollar, exactly 50 cents goes to construction or the construction bond. Right, that makes sense to me. I understand that piece. But from volume 2, then we see that the dollars per student in terms of how much is going to the schools comes out to be out of every dollar about 16 cents. So as a member of the CBRC, I want to better understand where the other 34 cents are going. It's not construction. It's not going to the schools. 16 cents to the schools, 34 cents, where are they going? And I have a feeling it's the things that are on this page. Some of it's FICA. Like I'm sure that all of these things are clearly going somewhere. But given the resources that are available to the CBRC, how would you recommend we find insight into understanding where that remaining budget is going? Is that the Excel tables? And I've noticed that part of the difficulty I've had is that it sometimes is cut by function, sometimes it's cut by object, but they're never crosswalked. So we can't see how the one connects to the other. So if you have advice for us as a professional to a layperson, it would be very appreciated.
I am going to yield to our Director Booth and perhaps Alexandra to kind of help guide the response to your question. And we may have to dig into your math a little bit more to get a clear understanding. I know that the volume 2, that's staff assigned to the building, and a big part of our cost categories that we used this year was specialized services. And that represents a significant amount of our budget for folks that are, they're kind of housed centrally, but they're distributed to schools based on overall district needs. So we have like this central way of saying where the needs are and then dispatching staff accordingly. And so I'm going to go ahead and invite our team if they feel comfortable to respond to that tonight. Otherwise, we might have to follow up with you.
And just so we can follow along, can you share what you were looking at in volume 2, or like what page you were looking at in volume 2 where you're getting the 16 cents?
Sure. So it's assessment of the whole thing, but it's about $11,000 per student. And we have about $40,000, which works out to something like 440 million. And 440 million out of half of next year's budget is 1/3. So 440 million out of the whole of next year's budget is 16%.
And you're talking about out of the whole thing, capital included, all of it.
Yeah, so 16, okay. I mean, the 16 out of the whole thing, or 1/3 of the non-capital. But I think it's a question of definitions. I think to your point, I think it's what is included and what is not, so that we can understand where the rest of that money is going.
Yeah, I can jump in and kick us off here. And I agree with you. That was one thing coming into PPS, trying to wrap my head around what's included in volume 2, what's in volume 1, and how to create that through line. The goal of volume 1, and this is where it ended up settling a little bit for me, the goal of volume 1 was to look at what's in the span of control and service within the schools. And so with that framework, not everything is included in volume 2. It's not a through line. So debt service, for example, will never appear here, but we do have debt that we have to pay off, and there is dollars per. We could look at and evaluate like a fund level evaluation of what's contributing, or doing the math that way. And I think we might be able to do some of that in the Excel reports that we provided. So like the staffing representation in volume 2 is really supposed to give you a really close to accurate picture of when you walk into that school, what are the humans that you're going to see within that building. Some of those are coded to a cost center that is actually a central department we categorize as a specialized service. And that's, we're trying to use language to really say that's, for example, custodians you'll find them in the maintenance department. There'll be a maintenance function code in volume 1. And that's going to be the through line to the custodial staff that might be appearing in the volume 2. There are also some custodians who are not at schools, who are in central office, and those would not be represented. And so as you can imagine, this pie that we're slicing up is very much more complex and is not as easy to say this total is going to equal that total. I am a purist when it comes to accounting, and I love T accounts and everything to tick and tie to 100%. These two documents do not accomplish that thing.
When you say
However,
specialized service, is that related to support services? I don't recall running across specialized services.
Let me make sure I have the terminology. We had 4 main categories.
Instruction, support services, enterprise.
Oh, so we are grouping our department codes into 4 main groupings. So we have our central office, what you think is traditional central office, finance. Then we have HR and their, superintendent's office. There are several others that are in there. Then we have the specialized services that are services where the department technically lives in this central office building, but those staff are primarily providing services inside of school buildings. And then we have our operations department, our operations departments teams that we categorize as we have these 4 broader categories to describe activities and effort, like the focused effort and where they're driving their efforts. That is different than the function level that you're describing, instruction, support,
Where can
services.
we find those 4 in the budget? So I see them in the PowerPoint, but I don't see them in the budget itself.
So they are not described there in the budget itself, in the budget document itself. And the reason for that is based on the fund and function and object presentation that Oregon budget law requires. That is another challenge. And yeah. And it's not to say that there isn't an opportunity to give more as part of that. It's about accessibility and readability for the community, and the function level really will describe the activity that is happening. So, for example, if I'm going to look into my book for just a second to try and grab a support and instruction example. So, for less restrictive programs, which is an instruction 1250. That it doesn't really matter which department it lives in, because the activity or the direction of that activity is providing less restrictive programs for students. And whether that is within a school building department code or whether that's in a specialized service department code, the focus is really, should we as a district be spending X amount of dollars on that, and how much have we spent historically? And that is very similar to, I would say, support services. And I'm going to call out fiscal services just because that's the one that I'm in, is when we look at that trend of spend over time and then the budget, is that an appropriate amount for our district to direct our efforts towards that type of function or operation, regardless of, I'm going to call it the cost center or the box we put it in, is that fundamentally where our values are guiding that we should invest into that level. Does that make sense?
Tammy, can I add too that
Yes.
as we worked with the community in January, that's when we initially created these categories. It was a preferred method from the superintendent to lead in that way. because she felt that was more meaningful in community discussions than following the functions within that are required, again, within our budget book. And so the budget team like clustered them, and in order to provide both current state information and then project into 26, 27. I don't know if that is helpful or not, but I do understand how that could be. It doesn't directly tie for sure, but that is the way we have been speaking about the budget with the community all this year.
I think it speaks to the underlying desire to know, out of $100, where is it going? Is it going to profit? Is it going to schools? Like, where's the money actually traveling, including the people who are in those sites? I do have further questions, but I know other people do as well. Would there be a way, maybe Tammy, that I could connect with you and share some of my more detailed questions? Or what's the process for that within CVRC in terms of specific questions about the way the budget is set up?
I think what we're hoping for is to have them come through the submission only so that we can capture and everybody has the same answer. That said, if there becomes this dialogue to really understand the question, I think it's worth talking through to clarify the question and the answer, and then I can assist in putting that through too. So I want to be responsive, but I want to make sure whatever question you're asking, the answer doesn't just only you have the benefit of hearing, that the rest of the committee can also hear that as well.
Okay. In that case, can I, as we're talking about these very specific questions, can we push answers to get all the way to the resolution or number rather than ending with it's complicated? Because a couple of them so far have felt a little bit like, yeah, it's complicated, it's messy. That's what we're here to dig into, and we really appreciate you taking the time to do it with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And the questions that we're talking through in this meeting are being recorded, and the answers provided are being recorded. Anything like the one that we've just discussed that feels a little unsettled, I'll continue to dig into.
Thank you very much.
So I want to give us a pause. Thank you very much, Director Booth. I know Angela has a hand raised. And did you will sidebar and get your additional questions answered? Did you get the resolution that you were looking for tonight? I just want to make sure that we're prepared to move on.
I'm prepared to move on. It sounds like Tammy and the team are also going to continue to look into this question. It's okay. The two things don't match is the answer, and it's complicated. So the more we as a CVRC can understand 1/3 of the money is going to the school, where is the other 2/3 of the non-construction money going? We need to be able to feel like we have an answer to that.
Okay.
And I'd love to get there as a group, and I'm sure we will.
Yes, thank you for that. And we're tracking that question. We'll make sure that we follow up. I'm going to ask Angela to put her question or comment in the space.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Nicole. Woo. So I had a couple of questions, and maybe I'll start with one that's kind of connected to what Anne just asked. So in slide 15, there was a share, y'all shared that the multilingual learner students went from 9.8% to 9.5%. But anecdotally, I know that we are seeing a lot of cuts to FTE for multilingual learners, and that ratio has increased by a lot. Can we get a answer as to like, if the multilingual learner number is down only by 0.4%, how much are we losing in multilingual learning staff so that we can see like, you know, is it an equivalent loss of 0.4%, or is the funding that we're receiving for multilingual learners being spent somewhere else or in another way besides staffing? And what are those pieces? I think to that point of like, how much of the multilingual learner dollars that we're getting from the federal and state level, how much of that is actually going into multilingual learner staffing and supports? So that's my first question. And it's not necessarily in this budget document, so it's okay if I don't get an answer right now. I just wanted to put that in the space. I think my other question specific to the budget presentation And I was just trying to figure out, because I watched it last night and I was like, I'm having different numbers and I need to get an answer. So on slides 38 and 41, y'all shared that the total cut from via of FTE across the system was 345 FTE with 139 licensed cuts. But then on slide 42, it says that the cuts are a total of 336.19 FTE. And then on slide 44, when we're looking by overall FTE changes by work groups, the total is 262.8 FTE. So I just want to understand why those numbers are different. And, is it a loss of 262.8 FTE? Is it 336.19 FTE? Is it 345 FTE? What exactly is the overall FTE change or loss in this budget? And then specifically for like licensed educators, is it the 139 licensed as was outlined in slides 38 and 41, or is it the 116 that's identified in slide 44?
So that is a terrific question, and I'm going to answer with a question to you. When you are doing the math, are you comparing the far right column? Are you doing the math on those slides? Because there's a difference between, in them, we have our current year budget.
Can I pause this for just a moment? I think we can follow along with the presentation if we are just given a moment to get caught up. That way you're not referencing it.
Great.
We can
With my hands.
Yes, I'm so sorry to make you do that labor. So we should be in the board presentation, yes? Is that, Angela, what slide you're referencing, or were you referencing?
In the budget presentation from the board, the PDF.
Pop that back open. And what slide did you reference? You said 40.
So if we start at 38.
38, okay. Give us just a moment, y'all. Thank you for your patience. And I know how it feels. There's also a little button down at the bottom where the numbers are. You can actually just type it in if it gets scroll heavy. Okay, are we close? Okay.
Yes, so I was looking at the column that says gap closing reductions. So trying to figure out what exactly is the reduction. So on this first slide, it says there's 254 in total. And if I'm adding up the licensed, I'm looking at 136. Then if you go to the next slide, or excuse me, not the next slide, it is slide 41. So like 3 slides forward. There you see that that total is 91. So 254 plus 91 is 345 as the gap closing reductions of FTE. And, there was a couple more licensed folks. So it was like a total of like 139 licensed folks. So I was like, okay, that's what I'm seeing for the FTE reductions. But then when we go to slide 42, which is the next one, there's an FTE change by category. And when I add up all of these, the difference between the blue and the red across them, I got a total of 336.19, which is less. So
I can explain a little bit, and I think I'll also invite Tammy, if she sees me wandering off down a rabbit trail, to please get us back on course. But what you are seeing here is our 25-26 budget compared to our 26-27 budget for these categories. And so we are reducing in every area. And what we're seeing on the prior slide, that gap closing, that is the gap between our current service level. And so somewhere in here, I don't have the exact slide, but there's a bar chart that follows these categories that shows our budgeted, our current service level, which is higher for both schools and specialized programs, and then our budget. And so that's what we're trying to identify, because that's the actual experience that our schools and departments are feeling right now, is what we have changed over the course since we adopted the fiscal 26 budget. And I'm going to see if I can find that slide, because I think it's an important one for us to talk about. There's been a lot of confusion about from adoption, the add backs we gave to both schools and specialized programs in response to student needs over the course of the year. And so those feel like that's a deeper cut, and that's what we're sharing, because that's the staffing notices. Oh, thank you. Somebody found it.
Yeah, Anne said it was slide 35.
Perfect. And so I really appreciate this one, because it shows again for us what we had adopted in the budget. That was our spending plan. Where we actually are today, you can see that for schools and specialized programs, as things have occurred over the years for service to students, we have increased in those areas. But our fiscal year 27 budget is a reduction that's even further from the adopted version. And that is what is real time happening in our schools. So I feel like that's really important to represent here. And again, with specialized programs, you can see how we added some FTE, some of those in increments in order to serve students is better in real time. And then our budget, again, is lower than both of those. I would like to take a minute to point out that for building supports, and so that Tammy was speaking to this earlier, but that includes maintenance, custodians, technology, all of those more centrally provided services have been reduced from the adopted budget all through the year. We've really tried to restrict our hiring so that we can shuffle that back into the schools. And I think that this slide illustrates that really, really well, especially in the central office. You can see proportionately that has been on the decrease, and we will definitely, that's definitely included in our proposed budget. That's a great question, Angela. I hope this helps daylight a little bit.
I think so. So I guess I'm trying to understand, when there is a number on, again, like slide 38, for gap closing reductions, those numbers, are they a reflection of the gap like the reduction between the CSL to fiscal year 27 or the fiscal year 26?
That is exactly what it is. It's if we did what we were doing today in the future, this would be the reduction compared to our fiscal year 27 proposed budget.
So the larger
correct.
number is really based off of the actuals of our budget for this past year.
This current year, correct.
Yeah.
And after we close this fiscal year, we'll report all this out on what actually occurred in our annual financial report. So those two things are kind of tied together, as one is our plan for spending, and then the annual financial report that comes out hopefully in December will be a reflection on what happened in the 25-26 year. This is great. Thank you.
Yeah, so then I guess if we go to slide 44, what is this, are those two bars representing? Are they representing the actuals of the budget or the projected, or like the budgeted?
I will invite Tammy here. I believe it's our actually adopted budget for fiscal year 26 and our proposed budget for 27. And these slides were not presented to the broader community, by the way.
Yeah,
But
that's right. These are
the slides I got from the board book that was shared at the budget board meeting last night.
I did not go over these slides. Let me reframe that.
Okay.
I did not walk through these slides with everyone. It was a very content heavy evening.
Yes.
But thank you.
Yeah. So I just trying to understand. So when I'm looking at this one, the reason that there is a difference is because this is about the adopted budget instead of the actual to date
That's correct.
Budget
So
line.
if you were
Yes.
looking at our budget book cold and you didn't have the presentation that was made to the board with our current state, you wouldn't have that context. And so that's why we bring that to community, because it's important for us to recognize that our schools and all of our teams are going to experience the loss from today's staffing as we move into the proposed budget.
So where would I be able to find or better understand the amount of FTE loss that is in this budget compared to what the actual FTE of our district is right now?
That should be reflected in the current service level, plus or minus a little bit, because every day it changes, right? But we did pull it at a point in time. So if we go back to those previous slides, those amounts you're seeing on those slides, and those slides only represent Gen Fund only, which is most of it. And the reason that it's important to point that out is there is a portion of staff that have shifted from Gen Fund to SIA and other grants as we maximize that to minimize reductions. But that current service level FTE was our baseline that we budgeted everything, that we made all of our plans on, that we reduced from.
But it's
So-
not this slide that's on the screen, right? It's the one before that has the actual current service level, right?
Yeah, those
Okay.
grids
The
that show
grids,
the
okay, yeah.
preliminary,
Got
the
it.
preliminary CSL is the staffing at the point in time when we started to make reductions. Yes.
Okay, so those would be the numbers that if I'm looking to understand what the actual FTE reduction from current actuals to
Yes.
budget, these would be the slides. And then
Correct.
the license that's there, is that license represented or just anyone who is licensed?
That should be license represented.
Okay, just clarifying. Thank you. I mean, I'll pause here because I want to also make space for other folks who have questions, but thank you.
All right, committee members, any other questions or deep dives that you want to see tonight? Andy?
As long as we're on this slide, and I guess it's parallel on some other slides, and this is, I feel like I know part of this, but it's maybe a newbie question. Can someone give us, I know I don't need an exhaustive list, but when we're talking about these, licensed, classified, non-represented, how does that so I'm assuming, especially when you go to schools, like licensed is, we're most talking about classroom teachers. What are the examples of just of the kind of employees that we're talking about, like more functional titles on some of the other categories? Would it be possible to have some examples of that?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that. Thank you for the question, Andy. So license would be any licensed educator, and that could include counselors, special education staff, multilingual teachers, anybody who is licensed as an educator in Oregon. We are required as part of our Oregon program and budgeting rules to code them a certain way in our system. The object is 111 for that group of staff. And so for classified, that code would be 112. I think it's 511112 or something like that in our budget book, but that is classified. And those are support staff that are represented by some level of organized labor union. And then our non-represented staff, you can see on this slide specifically, the majority of those are at the central office, and they provide very technical or like managerial type roles, and they aren't represented by any group. And then we have our administrators, which are may or may not be licensed administrators, but they serve in that more administrative capacity or executive level. So that's kind of how they're broke out.
That's helpful. And so on the school equivalent of this slide, the school equivalent of the slide, administrators is likely to be principals. APs, those kind of titles, correct?
Yep, APs.
Yeah.
In the appendix to this slide deck, there are more detailed specifics around the staffing for our schools. And I can't with confidence translate how that is represented in our budget book, but you can see kind of the changes in terms of all of these groups, I think, in how our schools are staffed.
Yeah, that's helpful. My other question, or one of my other questions, is around, you were talking about some of the assumptions in the budget and mentioned that this budget has a 1% COLA built into the assumption. And I guess my question is, how do I articulate this question? That strikes me as lower, or you mentioned that it's lower historically than both the forecast and the actual. It's certainly lower than some of the understanding that we're very early negotiations, lower than some of what I've read in some of the negotiating updates that the district has sent out, even as discussion. I guess the reason I'm asking this question is one of my worries here, and one thing I'd kind of posit for the committee to react to as maybe a goal for this budget, a short-term goal, is I would really like to not have a mid-year shortfall again next year. I'm sure we all would. I think functionally that's really bad, but also I think as a matter of trust, that would be really, really bad given sort of how things played out this year. And so I guess, that strikes me as a rosy assumption. Is there more context you can share for like why is that a calculated risk? Is that something we actually think is going to be real? I mean, I assume there would be some pretty big consequences, potentially even mid-year, if something gets negotiated that is significantly more than that. But am I right on that?
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate your questions. And we have a contingencies and risk slide that we share with the community. And that's like the top one, because we are in negotiations with our partners. So we don't really have anything set in stone to go by. And there was, even beyond the $56 million, a remaining budget gap for 26-27 after all of our work had been done to make the reductions that were presented here. And so I think there was a choice to be made about continued negotiations and work with our labor partners to get through this difficult time in order to preserve as many positions as we could in service to students. And so that is a pretty risky budget assumption. And if for any reason, our negotiations with all 6 of our labor partners don't land there, we're going to have to find a way to make up the difference within the budget. And so we had already gone through a staffing process with our schools and felt that would be very disruptive to go through that process a second time.
Can I just add to Andy's question, because I wrote that down too and forgot to ask. But how does budgeting only 1% for union COLAs and step increases when you can look at our salary tables and the distance between our steps is usually more than 1%? How does that impact our ability to maintain a balanced budget? I think, there's risk in certain assumptions, but I know that one of the issues with the mid-year budget gap was a tendency to under budget, especially around maintenance, and then having to make up all of that funding later. And in the past, when we had a surplus, that was fine. It wasn't fine, but we were able to deal with it. When there's an assumption that there will only be a 1% for step increases and COLAs, when we know for a fact that everyone who stays employed will have a step increase next year and all of those steps are more than 1%, are we just kicking the can down the road to then have this same problem present, regardless of if we settle a contract with each of these union partners? The salary scale is public.
Yeah, correct. This is all a very public process, and this is a budget that's been proposed. So we have shared those risk assumptions with our board of directors, and I'm awaiting feedback on that. The budget is balanced. There are risks associated with it. It is a accurate representation of what we need to budget for our operational services. And I think that's represented in this slide deck as well, where there was an area of increase to building supports where we found this year we were well under budgeted. So it's a real effort to present our current outlook. And again, I think there is a lot of belief that our continued partnership with our labor partners is going to help get us through a difficult, challenging time without additional changes to the budget. But again, I'm only one voice in many of this, so this is what we proposed.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. And I'm certainly not asking you to speak for, the district's negotiating strategy or anything like that. I think I'm naming this, and we can move on. And again, this is more of a comment for us to maybe consider down the line than a question. But I just think it's really important for the sake of trust that we are, like, I think you could make a plausible case, and I think you sort of just made part of it, that there's value in maybe making a budget that's the rosier side of realistic or something. But I think one way or another, we need to be transparent with folks about what the downside risk is. Like, are we taking some calculated risks here? And like, what does the downside risk look like if we're wrong, a little bit more specifically, so that if we are wrong, and if there's another mid-year shortfall, that it doesn't feel to people that it came entirely out of the blue, that there's something to reference. That, do you know what I mean? Because I think trust is kind of fragile at the moment anyway. And I think even what you explained right now feels to me to be another level transparent than what I heard in the discussion yesterday. And I know it's early, but anyway, so I'll be quiet for now because I'll continue pushing on this. But I just want to make sure we're not setting ourselves up with assumptions that are gonna have some pretty big downside risk right from the start, if that makes sense. And I know I'm not telling you anything you haven't thought about. I did have one more question, but I want to stop because
Can I
I'm sure others
pause
do
just
too.
for a minute, everybody?
Yeah.
I know, and I'm Director Booth, I'm going to tee it to you. I just want to do a time check, you all. There is another portion of this that our co-chair and our chair want to walk you through. And so I just want to leave a little bit of room for grace there. So if we maybe wrap in about 5, maybe 7 minutes, gives us time to pivot to that last part around the approach to creation of the report. Andy, did you want to finish your last question, and then Director Booth?
I did have one more, but it was on a different topic, and so I'm happy to yield to anyone else who has a question. Otherwise, yes, I could ask it. I think it's a simple one.
I just also want to reference that you have your intake form. You've got some ways to ask questions if you don't get them in the space tonight. So Andy, definitely feel free to ask your question, and then anyone else in the committee, please feel free to indicate that you have a final question as we move to Director Booth. Andy?
Sure. I think I was just hoping to get a little bit of context on slide. Sorry, I'm scrolling right now. It is slide 50, I believe, the one that talks about kind of a more structural reset next year, and just a little bit. I know you covered this a little bit in the presentation, but sort of what context can you share about that and sort of how it fits into like longer term planning?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we actually need to start with the slide before it so you can understand the projections around that anticipated budget gap for 27-28. That does mark the beginning of a new biennium. And so at that time, we have anticipated a pretty modest increase to the state school fund over the course of that 2-year period of 7.5%. We are also, as an employer, going to experience a significant increase in our PERS rates. And for the first year of the biennium, more so than the second year of the biennium, which is kind of an unusual situation. And this slide is really just illustrating that if we truly use reduce operations to the tune of $65.2 million, that's going to set a new current service level as we move beyond that period. And so that's really what this slide was meant to illustrate. If we use one-time funds, that projection will change, or a one-time fix. So I wanted to illustrate that, and that's true for any budget year. For example, as we came into 25-26, we used $23.5 million of a PERS reserve fund that was probably set aside to address this increase that we're going to see in 27-28. But we used 100% of it this year instead of reducing further in our schools and across our system. as we came into the current year. So our outlook would be different if we actually made operational changes instead of using one-time funds. PPS has been riding on one-time funds since 22, 23. And there was a budget update to the board in February that really kind of told the backstory a little bit about how we became, even in the current year, in a budget shortfall because of our use of one-time either reserves or pandemic funds to continue to maintain that service level. Did that help?
Yeah, so what I hear you saying is it's an effort, I guess you're thinking ahead to next year's budget to figure out to get to a point where we can have a balanced budget without relying on one-time funds, reserve.
Yeah, full
anything like that.
transparency. I don't want our community to think that this is it for like these big heavy changes we're making for 26, 27. That doesn't appear to be the end of the story, and I don't want to advertise that it would be. I feel like it's really important. Our best practices in budgeting and our adopted budget will show a 3-year forecast, and so bringing it out front now, I think, is really important.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you all. I see that Shane has a question. I also want to tee it back up to Director Booth just briefly to clarify a reference to a slide that I think that she saw. And then Shane,
thanks. I just wanted to add on, I heard around the step COLA assumption and the 1%, and I did just want to add clarity there that the assumption is a 1% COLA plus an applicable step. So I think I had heard that there was a perspective that a 1% would include both of those. That is not what is in this budget. It is a step and a 1% COLA. Thank you.
That was a helpful clarification. Thank you. I'm going to ask one question that I think is a pretty quick one to answer. I think it was last week the governor issued this executive order saying all the furlough days this year have to be made up next year. I realize there's likely going to be litigation around that and stuff. So I'm just curious if that was reflected in this budget, how you all are thinking about that. Any thoughts you can share would be appreciated.
Thank you, Shane. I know that our chief of staff is working closely with Salem and trying to figure out how the rules that the Department of Education will write around that executive order for implementation. So really more of the nitty gritty and the application of that executive order is still to be determined. This budget proposal is for a full school year. It does not include additional time that we reduced from the current year. So it is a full school year though.
Got it. All right, thank you.
All right, committee. I know that there are probably more questions and ways that we could keep going. I want to just do a time check. I know our chair person is having a bit of technical difficulties. So this next part, we're hoping that maybe our co-chairs, potentially Angela, who's in the space, can help walk us through a conversation with the committee about the approach to the creation of the report. Habakuk, if you could go back to the main presentation, there is a reference to, in the next slide or two, I think it's slide, this next one over. These were the slides that we referenced that give a little bit of historical context of last year's presentation and proposed budget review. Co-chair Angela, co-chair Bonilla, if you are still in the space, potentially we could keep us going.
Yeah, I'm here and I'm the vice chair. Don't want any stolen glory.
That's right. Vice chair, thank you for the correction. Do you want to walk the committee through a discussion around the approach that you all might take to the creation of your report?
Sure. I know when Karanja and I met with Alexandra to talk through kind of what it would look like moving forward, there was quite a bit of information that we still requested, in addition to the questions that folks have been sending individually. And one of the things that we started looking at was, is it worth this committee's time, or would it be a helpful way to start this report by looking at the prior report and some of the recommendations there, and seeing if those recommendations were implemented or not, and whether those are recommendations that would still would persist through this next report. We were thinking that we would get some more information from our team tonight, and some additional information really sharing the year-over-year changes from the adopted to proposed with enough detail to respond to those things. And then have our next meeting really discuss, analyze, evaluate the answers that we've received alongside the budget that we've seen, and really get into report writing in that third meeting. So, suggesting that folks kind of make sure that they've gone through the explainer on how to read the budget if they're not sure, reviewing the prior report asynchronously, like what questions are continuing, and sharing those questions ahead of time so that when we get into the next couple of meetings and we're really discussing the answers to those questions, we can start talking about recommendations, and we can start working on reporting or building that report. I do want to voice that we did uplift. We're in the middle of our RA, so I'm in the basement in a little quiet room, so my apologies. But we really wanted to make sure that we had a conversation. It's okay.
Oh my God.
We wanted to make sure that we had a conversation after we submit our questions and before we provide recommendations moving forward, but also wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that last year the committee said it would be great to have more time to do this work. This year, we are voicing that again. It would be really great to have more time to do this work, especially the preliminary work of reviewing prior documents, asking questions that are coming up from prior budget books, so that hopefully the presentations and the budgets that we get meet some of those responses ahead of time as opposed to following up. But that's what I have from our last meeting as co-chairs and vice chair in terms of how we would want to move forward.
Okay. Director Booth, did you have something?
Yeah, so I can jump in. Yeah, Alexandra took some really incredible notes from that meeting, and what I attempted to do was to translate those notes into Q&A that should be on the CBRC Q&A tracking log. It looks like most of them are under the questions submitted through form or email. That's because that's where I place them to then in our background data to gather answers. There are still a few outstanding that I have, and I was trying to scramble over to my screen to do a quick count, but I think there might be about 6 or 8 from the notes that still need to be wrapped up and finalized. And so my hope is to have those ready for you before the end of this week as well. And I will acknowledge the speed and the turnaround time in which you have to do that work is very challenging and intense. And I can see that in the schedule as well. I'm going to continue to try and find some ways to do that. The timeline between when we propose the budget, just in full transparency, when we propose the budget to when the board approves the budget is pretty quick. And the time for your voice to be reflected is before the budget is approved. And so long as that window is where it is at, this committee will continue, unfortunately, be challenged with a tight turnaround. And so we are really trying to get these answers as quickly as possible for you, but I am open and interested in ways to extend that out for you all as well.
Okay. So I want Vice Chair Bonilla, can you summarize? I want to know what you where we're at in the present moment. We've got about 30 minutes remaining. I know you all wanted more time. Where are you kind of currently in the moment?
Yeah, so this meeting tonight is the hope is to review the proposed budget presentation documents, prepare for reports, looking at those questions and the answers we've received. And then the meeting we'll have on Monday, the 4th, should be a working meeting on the proposed budget and looking at any additional questions and answers that we might have received. So really, I think it will be really helpful if throughout this week, folks continue to review the proposed budget presentation and submit questions through that form so that we have the answers that we need in order to provide our report, start working on the report. I think next meeting we'll likely kind of discuss a little bit more around which in the following meeting Monday the 4th, we'll probably talk about maybe some key themes of things that we're identifying as like, this is something we need to make sure that we are reviewing and want to bring up in that space and bring up in our recommendations and in our report. And then Wednesday, the 6th will be when we kind of work to finalize the last few pieces of the report, what will and won't get in, maybe delegating who's going to be writing which pieces, what parts of information we want to get in there. On that Thursday, we'll have additional meetings with staff as needed with the co-chairs and the vice chair in case there are any questions that are left unanswered after our next 2 meetings. The board will receive the report on the 12th of May. So, we have about 13 days to get this all done. And as everyone has said, it's a pretty tight turnaround. So I think right now, the action pieces for folks really are to kind of think through what other questions are coming up for you about this current budget and the spending. Make sure that those questions are submitted through the form, as well as take time to review the previous recommendations from last year's report and see if there are any threads we need to continue through to this year's report, so that next Monday, when we meet, we're able to just talk specifically about what do we want to include in this report, and how do we want to delegate some of that work.
Okay. Thank you for that very detailed overview of what we can expect from the committee next. Sounds like we've got some charge. How do you all, and I also look to staff, propose that we manage the last 26 minutes of our time together? I've messaged, I know Chair Adriel, a chairperson might be still having technical difficulties. So I will yield to staff and then yield obviously to Vice Chair Bonilla. Director Booth?
Yeah, so I would encourage some dialogue around interest or areas of interest as part of a kind of topic bringing up. What that can do within this group is to generate ideas or questions where you wouldn't necessarily have the space to talk outside. You can do it in this space and use this time for at least a portion of that for that would be a great use of time.
Yeah, I
thank
think,
you so much, Vice Chair.
Yeah, so if folks are, what are some themes or top line items that are coming to top of mind, that you feel would be important for us to include in this report? I know I heard a few questions around, accessibility of the information. If we look at the budget as $100, how much of it is actually going to student engagement? So it sounds like one of the themes is like, how do we create that transparency and legibility for the typical person? Are there any other, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding that concern as it was raised by a few of the questions, but what are some other themes that are coming up for folks? Thanks, Anne, for the thumbs up. And folks can popcorn out and just unmute and go ahead and share. And I would love to invite folks who maybe haven't spoken yet to share, because I know I talk a lot. So I'd love to hear from folks who haven't shared yet too.
Okay, I have shared. And Angela, is this all one? It seems like we agreed on this one, right? But I would say that one of the themes we might want to pursue in this report is this general question of how realistic the importance of making sure that we're making realistic enough assumptions in here to, among other things, avoid things like a mid-year shortfall and sort of the importance, the impact that potentially has on sort of the fragile trust that we're seeing right now in the district.
Yes. So how do our assumptions match the current or projected realities that the district will face, and how does that impact the level of trust from our community as we move forward in these budget conversations?
Yeah, and just the importance of being transparent about it's fine if we are intentionally making some sort of taking some calculated risk, but being transparent about that so it doesn't feel like the public's having sort of the rug pulled out from under them. So yeah.
Yes.
In reviewing the document from last year, one of the recommendations was the blended classrooms and staffing strategy proposed, and to provide an analysis on what that looks like and supports for teachers and does it work and all of those pieces. Clearly, as we head into this next year, that lever is being pulled even more strongly now. So I'd suggest that we review what was discussed last year and see how much of that has already been done. And if there's still things on the to-do list, to continue to reiterate that, because we're going to have a lot of students in blended classes and a lot of teachers teaching blended who haven't taught blended before.
Yes. So that blended classrooms analysis and review what was discussed, how much has been done, and continue to reiterate the needs to ensure that, educational quality is high as educators and students are learning a new way of schooling.
Committee, Vice Chair Bonilla, I just want to reference that we can stop sharing screen during dialogue, and we can bring the presentation back if you all have a slide to reference. Just want to make sure that you all know that that's something that we can do. Is that all right? Should we stop sharing? Okay. Well, let's not have that up. There we go. So it looks like I'm on speaker view. All right. So Vice Chair Bonilla, continue walking us through some of this unpacking.
Yeah, so far I've heard transparency and legibility for the public around, outside of out of $100, how many dollars are going directly to student services. The general question around how realistic are these assumptions, and being transparent about the risks we are taking so the public understands, yes, this might be a risky assumption, but this is why we're taking it. And then, reviewing what was discussed around blended classrooms, and analyze what has been done from those previous recommendations, and continuing to reiterate the need for support and analysis of the success or lack thereof of blended classrooms. We don't know, we have to review. Anything else that is coming up for folks?
I want to dig into this more and looking at the materials, but to me, I think the concept of limitations around the use of the dollars and how, we have this huge influx of money from the bonds, but those bonds are clearly earmarked for specific things and they can't go towards the general fund, other things like that. So just, making sure that that is transparent and clear and understandable.
Yeah. Yeah, transparency and clarity around the limitation of use of dollars, different buckets, as it's often referenced, like the bond, general fund, debt service, all those kinds of pieces, and making sure that that's clear for, the average person trying to understand our budget.
Right.
Any other thoughts? I'd love to also not to put any students on the spot, but I know especially without a voting, without the ability to vote, I think this is a really important place to hear your voice and your voices, and make sure that we're bringing that into this space. So if there's anything that's coming up for you that is a question, please.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I haven't been super tapped into this right now because I had to dip out for like half an hour, so I haven't been fully in the loop. So I'm just this might be kind of out of place, but I just think it's important that we try to work to preserve like a lot of the programs that people enjoy, like dual language and music and arts and stuff and after school stuff. And so that really minimizes the impact that people complain about when they talk about how the school budget does. Because I know that usually when people are talking about the budgets, they're saying, "Oh, we won't be able to do this kind of art because budget or whatever." And I just think it's important that while that is not exactly what we're talking about as we're trying to reduce the size of the budget, I think that's something that we should think about, but also we will have to make some cuts, so that is something that is to be expected. But yeah.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing is, a place of advocacy of like, how can we preserve the programs that are really big point, like reasons that draw our students into school every single day, and our families to our district. And I wonder if maybe a question behind that is something around, how does this budget impact these different programs, including like DLI and funding for after school programming and core enrichment, music, performing arts? And like, are those things being impacted proportionally or disproportionately by other things? Would that be a helpful way to kind of look at that question?
Yeah, I think that would be good. Yeah.
I had a similar question around sports, and I'm wondering how that is connected with this. And is it that the schools make, and I guess that's maybe more high school, but is it the schools who will make the decisions on those specific kinds of things? Or so I guess I have two questions. One is, how is sports related to all of this? And then two, which goes with what Eli was asking about with kind of extracurricular school sponsored things. And then two is, where is that decision made? Is it this at this level, or is it at the school level?
Yes, and I do know that part of the sports budgets are outside of this process, and that there is like I don't want to call it a pay to play, but there is like a different funding source where it's mostly like parental funding or funding from, the fundraising that is brought is what helps fund the sports at schools, and it's not so much out of our budgets, because that was part of the question around, can the district include boys volleyball was something that came up at the board a few months ago, and there was this conversation about the cost. So like, how can we get clarity around whose decisions, who makes these decisions at what level, and where those funds come from?
Yeah, I think there, at least in the high school, there are school sponsored sports, and then there are club sports. And I don't know because they're at water polo is a club sports, and the parents fund that, and maybe that's what boys volleyball is. But then there are, I think, the mainstream sports are funded by the schools, I think, but I'm not sure. I don't think there might be incremental costs by the parents, but I think the school funds them all. And I just don't know. And again, I don't know how that relates to this work. If this is just academic work that we're doing, or what.
I think I can make a little bit of a thing about this. From what I've heard, as someone who has a lot of friends in sports, is that club sports are a more private thing that is run that is not relative to the schools, and that the
That's
school
not
funded.
true.
Oh,
That there is like club programs, but for instance, at the high schools, water polo is a high school sport, but it's categorized as a club, and so at the high school, and so parents pay for that.
I think you're talking about the difference between like a school club and then external traveling club sports.
No, that's not what I'm talking about at all. So in a high school, you've got football, basketball, track and field, whatever, right? Those are all, I think funded by the school. Then, so for instance, Lincoln High School, they've got a football team. I believe it's funded by the school. They have a water polo team at Lincoln High School, and it is not funded by the school. The parents pay for that, but it is a Lincoln High School team.
Yes, I was saying the clubs. I was saying Eli and you were talking about two different types of
Yeah.
clubs.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I think Eli,
Yeah.
you were talking about like the external private club sports where folks travel across the state, and Julia, you're talking about a school has clubs, and one of those clubs is water polo. And why is
Or
that
whatever
club
sport
compared to a sport like football that seems to come out of a school budget? So
Yeah.
if I'm hearing, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and then also those are sports that bring in a lot of revenue for schools as well, I know. So, but I just kind of wondering how that's related, or it might not be related. Maybe this budget is purely kind of academic, and that's different. I just don't know.
I also want to make sure that we recognize, I want to tee up Director Booth or someone from our finance team if we're needing more clarification on some of what the discussion is tonight. Director Booth?
Yeah, I can jump in here. I won't be as eloquent or as informed as our athletic director, but centrally we have an athletics department that is included in this budget. And in the general fund budget document, it's going to be page 101. Just you could make a note of that. You're going to start at the very bottom, and you're going to see some assumptions around our revenue for football admissions, for basketball admissions, wrestling admissions. Then we have our pay-to-play fees. That is the external contribution of that. Our budget for athletics is much greater than the amount of fees we collect. So general fund is funding many of our sports. We also have, for the high school level, for the middle school level, we have the PIL fundraising that happens that funds our middle school level sports. And those would not be included in this document, although historically there has been a little bit of supplement, like in the current year, I think of an FTE or two for middle school sports that's transitioning for next year. So there is a distinction, and this is where Marshall Haskins would be really helpful here, between a club sport and the OSAA sponsored sports. And that's where you see the distinction between is whether we're participating under OSAA or whether we are opting not to, either because it is too expensive or doesn't have the participation or a laundry list of items which he would better classify than me. So yes, that athletics is absolutely a part of this budget. And we do have revenue on one side, and then on the expenditure side, I might need a little bit of time to find where that's at. But I think I hear you that you want to hear more about athletics. And so if we can quantify a question, get it through, submitted, that would be enough for me to kind of open up and dig in.
Good. Thank you for that. Vice Chair, I want to give you a time check that we're at about 10 minutes. I want to tee it back up to you. I'm assuming that you'll also help us close out and adjourn tonight if a chairperson is unable to get her microphone working.
Absolutely. Yeah, so with about 10 minutes left, are there any other big overarching questions or maybe themes that folks want to put forth for us to kind of come back to next meeting? So far, I have kind of the transparency and legibility for the public around where the funds are going and specifically to student school-based services. How, a question about the assumptions and how we can be transparent about the risks we're taking, an analysis around blended classrooms and that data, clarity around the limitation of use of dollars between the different funds, making sure it's transparent. A conversation about the preservation of programs. How are these funds being reduced? Is it proportional or not compared to other programs? And having that same question around sports. How is that related to budgets? And is that decision made at the district level, at the school level? How is it funded? Who owns that work? Any other kind of themes or questions coming up for folks?
I have one to share, and it might turn out to just be a question and not a theme. So I don't know that it belongs on that list. But PERS going from 4% to 20%, and Tammy, this has got to be blowing your entire team's mind. We'd love to know more about how that's happening. How is that legal? Are we in some agreement? Is this going to happen again in the future? Are they going to go to 60% next year? Because it seems just as ludicrous. So just more information around why the change. I believe I heard something last night about an expiring credit or something along those lines. But that really stood out as a problem because you see why.
Yeah, I can actually answer that. Not as well as Chief Morrison would. She's far better at PERS than I am. However, back in 2001, 2002, 2003, early 2000s, PERS rates were an issue, and you could go out for a PERS bond. And so the idea with a PERS bond is that we could pay the debt service on the bond, and that would be less expensive than the increase in PERS rates. And it was. We saved, as a district, a significant amount of money. Michelle would know that number. That was designed, that bond that pays down our PERS is designed to expire in 2029-ish, at the time when it was established. What has happened with PERS is that those employer rates through growth in payroll, that exponential growth that happened in payroll during the pandemic period, sped up the use of that side account. So now the bill is due for our debt service before the finalization of our rate credit. And so there's this little bump that's happening. So the school pool, the school rate for everybody is the same. Every school district has the same rate. For people that had side accounts like PPS, our rate actually dropped down to 0 for years. So you were paying the debt service and we weren't paying PERS because they had our money they weren't using. And so this transition that's happening was expected, it was anticipated. When it was designed originally, the debt service was supposed to fall off at the time that the rate increased. And so then it wouldn't feel like such a huge swing. It's happening just a little early to a lot of districts with side accounts. If you're a district without a side account, your PERS increase is moderately increasing. If that makes sense.
Perfect sense, and thank you.
Okay.
So that would mean that the percentage of PERS is mostly staying the same year to year, but the cost of PERS for us because of that side account is kind of a huge fluctuation because we went for years with 0% cost, and now we're kind of paying that off now because it's expiring earlier than we expected.
Yeah, and PERS rates are climbing as well. So there is an impact that school pool rate is also increasing. It just would have been at whatever the PERS school pool rate swing would have been, which is much smaller than going from 0 to 4.5 and from 4.5 to 20. Now, when it goes from 4.5 to 20, but our debt service rate goes from 18 down to 4.5, right? Then it's just flip-flopping the same two numbers, and we're feeling steady. Now, in our preliminary PERS rates in the out years are much higher and they are preliminary. And so while it isn't impactful for next year, we are watching and waiting for those more finalized rates to come out and are hopeful that they won't be quite as high of a swing.
Is it true that a lot of this money that we lump under PERS is not even going directly to benefits, right? It's essentially debt service. Is that right? Or no?
Let me make sure I understand the question correctly.
Because there's the PERS rate, and the presentation is like the PERS rate. We don't have, sorry. We can,
yeah, no,
I would love for Chief Morrison to come
right.
back and give us a PERS 101 thing, but like there's some of it that is like unfunded liability, essentially, right? Okay.
Yeah, so she's going to. The PERS rate projected for next year is a 4.18, and then the UAL, the debt service portion is 18.79.
Right. I mean, I guess my interest here, since we're bringing it back to themes, would be I think it seems like in past reports there's been at least some section on sort of where we would encourage the district to do some advocacy at the state level, and it does feel like given how much this PERS situation is funny, especially like the gaps in the out years, that it's something that we might want to dig into a little bit more and maybe note that we think that it's ripe for some advocacy. Or something.
Yeah. And I know, Shane, you were going to share something if you wanted to go ahead before we log off.
Yeah, just on this point, I think, just to confirm the unfunded actuarial liability that's mentioned in the documents, that's that side account expiring, right? That's when I see that phrase, that's what we're talking about. Just to confirm. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
And then one non-PERS point, just for the group to maybe think about, I don't know if we want to do this, but potentially recommending in the report like alternative funding sources that they could consider. One being like the changes that were recently made to like fundraising for the independent schools as opposed to the Portland Family or the Portland Public Schools Fund. I realize it's a hot topic, and I don't know if even this group would come to consensus on what the recommendation should be, but something for people to maybe mull over and we can talk about further at future meetings.
Thank you. Yeah, and I do want to share that there is advocacy happening in different spheres around other funding sources, and maybe we can talk about that next meeting as well, around like the city looking into changes to the way that the arts tax is created so that it separates education from nonprofits so that it's a lot clearer, or advocating for PERS to not be part of the state school fund funding so that we actually know what goes to students versus what's going to PERS and the UAL. But we have about 1 minute left. Because I know I can see Nicole's looking at her clock. And I think, just to close us out, I think just moving forward, make sure that you're submitting any questions that you didn't raise here to that form. Make sure you take time to review the budget and pull any questions from there that you can submit to the form, as well as the previous report, if there's anything you would like updates on. And also continue to think about themes that you want to bring to the next meeting. But otherwise, I am so grateful to be working with all of you, and I really appreciate your time tonight. And I would love for y'all to get back to your pets, your families, your meals. But thank you for spending the time and doing the work with us. I really appreciate it.
Beautiful. I can't sum it up better than that. Y'all are doing a heavy lift, and you're doing it, and you're volunteering and doing it. And I am learning right alongside you. And just am deeply appreciative of what you're elevating and the accountability and the slight trust build that I see happening with each exchange. So just deeply grateful for you all. With that, giving it back to Vice Chair Bonilla to adjourn us officially to give you back your evening. You got to come off mute first.
Come off mute. We are officially adjourned here at 7:30 p.m.
All right. Good evening, everyone. We'll see you on Monday, May 4th.
All right. Take care, y'all.
Thanks all.